Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, the sharp crystal exploding like a gunshot in the silent ballroom. But no one looked at the glass. Every pair of eyes was locked on the man who had just destroyed an empire's future with a single breath. I stood alone in the center of the gilded hall, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs that I prayed didn't show on my face. Before me stood Crown Prince Cassian de Valtor, his golden eyes burning with a mixture of confusion and unbridled rage, his hands still gripping the waist of the beautiful, trembling Saint Elian. They were moments away from announcing the engagement that was the climax of the novel The Golden Lily, the story I had been cursed to inhabit 3 days ago. As the villainous Duke Caelan Thorne, I was destined to scream, make a scene, and eventually be executed for treason. Instead, I had walked up to the happy couple, smiled the coldest smile my trembling lips could manage, and whispered one word into the prince's ear. Brother. The color had drained from Cassian's face faster than blood from a severed artery. He looked at Elian, the boy he loved, the boy he was defying the nobility to marry, and then back at me, the villain he despised. What did you say? Cassian's voice was a low growl, vibrating with the threat of violence. I smoothed the lapels of my midnight blue velvet coat, channeling every ounce of aristocratic arrogance Caelan Thorne possessed. I said. I enunciated clearly, ensuring the court magicians amplifying the sound carried my voice to every corner of the room, that you cannot marry Saint Elian. Not unless the royal family wishes to legitimize incest. He is not a commoner found in a basket, Your Highness. He is the late king's bastard. He is your brother. Chaos. Absolute, beautiful chaos. 3 days earlier, I had woken up in a bed of silk sheets with a headache that felt like a cleaver splitting my skull. I wasn't an actor or a hero. I was a structural engineer from Seattle who read too many web novels on his commute. Now, I was Duke Caelan Thorne, the antagonist of a third-rate BL drama known for his obsessive jealousy and grisly death by beheading in Chapter 150. I had no intention of dying. The system, a glowing blue interface that flickered in my peripheral vision, had given me a simple objective: survive the prologue. But the plot was a titanium cage. If I tried to run away, a searing pain, like liquid fire, would course through my veins, the penalty for out-of-character behavior. I couldn't leave the capital. I couldn't resign. I had to play the game. But the rules didn't say I had to play stupidly. Caelan Thorne was supposed to be a love-crazed fool. I decided he would be a calculating monster. The revelation at the ball wasn't a lie. I had spent my first 2 days tearing through the Duke's private archives. Caelan was the Minister of Intelligence, after all. He had known Elian's parentage all along and hid it to protect the prince's reputation, suffering in silence while Cassian fell for his half-sibling. The original Caelan was a tragic martyr. I was not. Back in the present, the royal guards were ushering a sobbing Elian out of the hall. The king, Cassian's uncle and the current regent, looked ready to have a stroke. Cassian, however, did not leave. He descended the dais, his heavy military boots clacking against the stone, closing the distance between us until I could smell the sandalwood and ozone scent that clung to him. He towered over me, a wall of broad shoulders and suppressed violence. You lie, Cassian hissed, his hand snapping out to grip my throat. His leather gloves creaked against my skin. You are a snake, Caelan. You would say anything to keep me. My pulse skyrocketed. This was the power dynamics, part of the genre I usually enjoyed reading, not living. The grip was tight enough to bruise, not to kill. Yet, I didn't flinch. I forced my eyes to meet his. Caelan's eyes were a piercing, icy emerald. Check the blood records in the Temple of Origin. I choked out, keeping my voice steady despite the pressure on my windpipe. I did not speak to keep you, Cassian. I spoke to save you from being remembered as the prince who bedded his own kin. His eyes narrowed, searching mine for the familiar mania, the desperate adoration he was used to seeing in the Duke. He found none. He saw only a terrifying, abyssal calm. He released me, shoving me back. If you are lying, he whispered, I will not execute you. I will flay you alive myself. And if I am right? I asked, massaging my throat, a smirk touching my lips. Will you beg my forgiveness, Your Highness? Cashin looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. The hatred was still there, but the contempt. The contempt was gone, replaced by a dark, dangerous curiosity. "Get out of my sight," he commanded. I bowed, deep in mocking. "As you wish." The weeks that followed transformed the capital into a viper's nest. The DNA test, a magical ritual involving the bloodstone, proved me right. Elian was indeed the late king's illegitimate son. The engagement was annulled immediately. Elian, the White Lotus protagonist, did not take this well. In the original story, he was a beacon of purity. But stripped of his romantic halo, his actions began to look different. Desperate to maintain his status, he began to court the sympathy of the noble factions, painting himself as a victim of the Duke's cruel exposure. I stayed in my estate, drinking vintage wine and waiting for the other shoe to drop. The system had been quiet, only pinging me with a survival rate, 45% notification. It was rising, but not safe yet. One rainy evening, the heavy oak doors of my study burst open. I didn't look up from my paperwork. I believe knocking is customary, even for royalty. Cashin stood in the doorway, dripping wet. He wasn't wearing his ceremonial armor, just a loose white shirt clinging to his muscular frame and dark breeches. He looked exhausted. He looked devastating. He slammed the door shut and marched to my desk, planting both hands on the mahogany surface. "Why? You'll have to be more specific, Your Highness." "Why did you do it publicly?" Cashin demanded, water dripping from his hair onto my ledgers. "You could have come to me privately. You could have sent a letter. You chose to humiliate Elian. You chose to break the court. Would you have believed me?" I countered, finally looking up. "If I came to you in the dark, whispering secrets, you would have called me a jealous ex-lover and thrown me in the dungeon. I had to destroy the fantasy entirely to make you see the reality." Cashin stared at me, his chest heaving. The tension in the room shifted, thickening into something heavy and suffocating. This was the enemies to lovers pivot. The moment the hatred starts to taste like obsession. "You've changed," Cashin said quietly. He walked around the desk. I remained seated, though every instinct screamed at me to run. He stopped beside my chair, his hand resting on the backrest, trapping me. "You used to look at me like I was the sun. Now, you look at me like I'm a problem to be solved. People change when they realize the sun only burns them." I replied, my voice low. Cashin's hand moved, his knuckles brushing against my cheekbone. It was a possessive gesture, dominant and questioning. "I hated you, Kalen. I hated how you clung to me. But this coldness, it irritates me more. You prefer the pathetic puppy? I prefer to know what you are planning," he murmured, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. "Elian is plotting something. He has been seen meeting with the Southern warlords. My spies say they are moving." I stiffened. The Southern warlords. In the novel, they were the mid-game villains. Elian was supposed to purify them. If he was allying with them, the plot was broken. "He wants the throne," I realized aloud. "If he can't be your consort, he'll claim his right as the king's blood." "He has no army," Cashin dismissed. "He has the narrative," I corrected. "The poor, discarded saint, cast aside by a cruel prince and a wicked duke. The people love him." I stood up, forcing Cashin to step back. "You need to kill him." Cashin's eyes widened. "He is my brother. And I loved him. And that love will be your tombstone," I said ruthlessly. This was the difference between Kalen and me. I knew this was a story. I knew the stakes. "If you cannot do it, Cashin, then step aside. I will be the villain you believe me to be." Cashin grabbed my wrist, pulling me into him. The impact knocked the breath out of me. His other hand wound into the hair at the nape of my neck, tilting my head back. "You are not a villain," Cashin whispered, his gaze dropping to my lips. "You are mine. You are my minister. My shadow. You do not act without my command. Then command me." I challenged him, my heart racing so fast I felt dizzy. "Survive," he ordered. "We go to the south tomorrow. We end this treason before it begins." The journey to the south was a blur of mud, steel, and rain. The slow burn was agonizing. We shared a tent, strictly for security purposes, Cashin claimed, but the air between us crackled with unsaid words. He would watch me map out strategies by candlelight, his gaze intense and heavy. I would catch him staring at my hands, my neck. We were attacked in the Crimson Valley. It was an ambush. Elian had not just allied with the warlords. He had given them the royal patrol routes. Magic flared, explosions of fire and ice tearing through the trees. "Protect the prince," I screamed, drawing my rapier. I wasn't a fighter in my past life, but Kalen's muscle memory took over. I moved like water, parrying strikes, the steel singing a deadly song. I saw Cashin fighting 3 men at once, his broadsword cleaving through armor like paper. He was magnificent, a god of war. Then I saw the archer. High up in the canopy, a figure with silver hair, Elian. His bow was drawn, the arrow glowing with a sickly, purple light. A curse arrow. It was aimed squarely at Cashin's back. There was no time to think. No time to strategize. "Cashin!" I threw myself forward. I didn't shove him. I shielded him. The arrow hit me. It felt like being punched by a glacier. The cold spread instantly from my left shoulder, paralyzing my arm, my chest, my lungs. I crumpled. The last thing I heard was Cashin's roar, a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. Waking up was a slow, painful process. I was warm, wrapped in furs. The smell of medicinal herbs was overpowering. I opened my eyes to see the canvas roof of a command tent. I tried to move, but a heavy weight pinned my right hand. Cashin was asleep, sitting in a chair by the cot, his head resting on the mattress, his hand gripping mine so tightly his knuckles were white. He looked terrible. Stubble covered his jaw, dark circles bruised his eyes. I squeezed his hand. His head snapped up instantly. "Kalen, still alive?" I rasped. My voice sounded like gravel. Did we win?" Cashin didn't answer. He buried his face in my palm, his shoulders shaking. I froze. The tyrant prince, the man of iron, was trembling. "You idiot," he muffled against my skin. "You absolute, suicidal fool. You took a curse arrow." The healers said. "They said your heart stopped twice." "Occupational hazard," I joked weakly. Cashin lifted his head. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Elian is dead." I paused. "You killed him." "He tried to take the one thing I have left," Cashin said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly possessive whisper. "I beheaded him on the battlefield. The plot was gone. The protagonist was dead. The original romance was ashes. And the warlords? Surrendered. They feared the man who butchered the saint." Cashin stood up and leaned over me, brushing the hair from my sweating forehead. "Why, Kalen? Why take the arrow? You claim to be selfish. You claim to be cold. I calculated the odds. I lied. The kingdom needs a king more than it needs a duke." "Liar," Cashin murmured. He leaned down, his lips brushing against my ear. "You did it because you are mine, just as I am yours." He kissed me then. It wasn't gentle. It was acclaiming. It tasted of blood and desperation and relief. It was the culmination of weeks of suspicion and suppressed desire. I melted into it, my good hand clutching his tunic, pulling him closer. The system chimed in my mind. Asterisk, main storyline complete. New path unlocked, the tyrant's beloved. Asterisk, but I ignored it. When he pulled away, he rested his forehead against mine. "You ruined my wedding," he whispered, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "I saved your life," I corrected. "You ruined me," he insisted softly. "I cannot look at anyone else. I cannot trust anyone else. You broke the world I knew with one word, and built a cage around me. Are you complaining, Your Highness?" Cashin kissed the corner of my mouth. "No, I am commanding you. Heal quickly, Kalen. We have a coronation to plan, and I will not walk that aisle alone." And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Kalen take control of his fate, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a lover who nearly killed you to save you from yourself? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,